You are watching Access LaPorte County Channel 97. Coming up next is the July 23rd meeting for the LaPorte County Data Centers Working Group. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
We want these data centers and how we're going to proceed forward. And we're hoping that by having everyone at this table, we can come up with some good ideas. So if we can just start out with perhaps Mitch on the end, and then we'll go around the table. And
Mitch Bishop, I'm LaPorte County Planning.
Jimmy Pressel, LaPorte County Council.
Carl Sender Dalton Municipal Advisors, Financial Advisor to the LaPorte County.
Shaw Friedman, Attorney.
Paul Vicari, LaPorte County Stormwater Management Director.
Tim Frankie, City of LaPorte President.
John Watson.
Jimmy Wilson.
so with that being said, there are four things that we're really looking at. Location, 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 kind of like buying a house. It's really important that when we have these centers coming in, that we're putting them in the right location. Water is an issue. We've heard this throughout the entire state. Second, electricity. And lastly, the tax incentives. So when we go to the, we hit each one of the most important things with location is getting it in an industrial park. And currently, I think everyone in this room probably knows we have KOP. It is a industrial park that we have poured lots of money, lots of time, equity, and sweat into. And it's really important that we take these centers and we put them and we try to push them into the industrial parks. Second is water. I know that there's been a lot of concerns, a lot of phone calls on the concern of it using up our water on our water tables. There is a system. It is the closed loop system. And instead of using water continuously, it would take water, fill up, and then we would be using the same water over and over again. So that will help us with the water. Thirdly, the electric. Everyone knows and I'm sure everybody's been hit with the higher tax, with the higher rates for electricity. So it's kind of important for us to make sure that as these centers come in, our rates for our constituents don't start jumping. And so it's going to be something that we're going to monitor and make sure that we do right. And then lastly, the tax plan. It can't be a giveaway. It's got to be something that we consider the annual revenue that it would be bringing. These centers do not have like permanent jobs. So once the centers are built, they're probably employing anywhere between 10 and 15 people. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at that. Even agreements like the pilots or payments in lieu of taxes will help us offset the loss of revenue from bills like SB 1. So these are things that we have considered. Those are the four things that we're really going to focus on. And we're just going to have some of the experts talk about the different things. So, Carl, would you like to go next with the...
Sure. I'm going to talk about understanding some of the taxation of data centers here in Indiana. So we do have a PowerPoint, and I know some of you may have handouts, so
The battery.
yeah.
There.
Got it? Okay.
Just press it down.
Okay. All right. Real property. So the buildings are assessed similar to any other commercial buildings in the county. And unless they're giving any type of an economic revitalization deduction or a tax abatement, they would be fully come on to the assessment rolls and would help increase the county's assessed value. Abatement is available up to 10 years on any real property. And that would be a decision that the county would have to make, what type of an abatement if one's being requested. Hardware supporting computing, networking, and data storage functions, including servers, routers, are considered business personal property, or in the statute, they call it enterprise information technology equipment. Under Senate Bill 1 that was recently passed, under the former personal property rules, there was a 30% floor on the cost of all equipment to be a minimum of what the assessed value. So after depreciation, sometimes your values could fall below the 30%, down to 10 and 5% or whatever. Senate Bill 1 that was approved removes that 30% floor, so that's going to cause new investment, not for existing equipment, but any new investment would not have that floor. There is an exception, so in an existing TIF area that was created prior to the end of 2024, that 30% floor would remain for any new investment that occurs there, but it had to be an existing area. Tech companies, we're told, will replace computers, servers, cables, routers, typically every 2 to 5 years because of the heavy usage. And so some of the equipment will never reach the 30% floor because it's always being recycled, taking out the old, putting in new, and then they'll start the depreciation all over again. Indiana Code 6-1.1-10-44 allows local designating governmental bodies, such as the county, to grant eligible business personal property a tax exemption over a specified period. And this is what this law was created for: data center companies coming in. And because Indiana is one of the few states that actually taxes personal property, it can be quite expensive if they're spending millions and maybe $1 billion on equipment. It can get very expensive, the personal property taxes. And in order to get a tax exemption, typically it's done through a development agreement that's approved by the fiscal body, and it would specify the amount of deduction and over the time period. Many of these tech companies will come in and request 100% enterprise information technology deduction on its eligible personal property over the life, typically, of the lease of the facility, which can range from 20 to 30 years. That's kind of what we're seeing. It'll be up to the local body to decide how much they want to give of the deduction. And we'll come in later on, we'll talk about some alternatives of other revenue sources that would be available to the county. So the combination of real property tax abatement and the tax exemption or deduction on eligible personal property can result in very significant property tax savings to these companies, and will lower the county and all the other taxing units' assessed values. I want to jump now to sales tax on data centers. Indiana Code 6-2.5-15 allows a sales and use tax exemption on purchases of qualifying data center equipment and energy, so electric usage, to operators of a qualified data center for a period not to exceed 25 to 50 years. 25-year exemption exists on investments less than 750 million, and a 50-year exemption on investments exceeding 750. If they're replacing equipment every 2 to 5 years, it's a lot of tax that they are incurring. And so they're seeking these exemptions. So in order to qualify for the exemption, data centers must reach these thresholds for investments within 5 years, and there's an additional threshold. So in counties with populations of at least 100,000 or more people, you need to have $150 million invested in that 5-year period. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation awards a sales tax exemption. That's not done by the local body. So let's talk a little bit about some incentive considerations. You know, it'll be up to the negotiating team and the county to decide what type of incentives, how much. Maybe one approach is no real property tax abatement or limiting the amount or the period of the tax abatement. On the eligible personal property, consider maybe a smaller portion that stays on the tax rolls that goes back to all the taxing units. Whether it's 90% is a deduction and 10% goes back. Whatever that amount, you have that flexibility in your negotiations. And so here's the key ones. Many communities have successfully negotiated a payment in lieu of taxes, or they're being also called a community impact payments, to be paid to the county in lieu of collecting the personal property taxes. And as Commissioner Grammarosa mentioned earlier, this is a way to help offset some of the foreseen property tax revenue losses as a result of Senate Bill 1 that's going to be occurring over the next 5 years. Having a significant, community impact payment coming directly into the county funds can help fund reductions of revenue that's going to be lost. You're going to be competing with other areas if this is something that the county wants. Data centers won't consider locating a community with some type of tax deduction on its eligible personal property and possibly some amount of real property tax abatement. Other considerations is requiring the developers for these centers to make certain infrastructure improvements in the area of their development, including roads, water, sewer improvements, and possibly fiber in surrounding areas. I think, as mentioned, data centers typically employ few persons as compared to other warehousing and manufacturing companies, but the initial construction jobs do provide a lot of construction jobs for the county, and Matt may be talking about that later. Look at other community examples of balance incentives and how it can be beneficial for the community. Marinco County in Virginia, the Meta deal is frequently cited by public policy observers as one to consider. And so I'm sure that information is going to be given to this committee to look at. Good Jobs First Org has reports on impacts of data centers to state budgets, and there has also been a recent article about how data centers could leave Indiana short on its budget revenue. Now, if they don't come to Indiana, then, we're not losing those revenues. So this is kind of a very high level of taxation of data centers. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Grammarosa.
We're going to pass this on to the economic development team so that they can talk a little bit about how it's going to affect us.
Problems with Wi-Fi. We'll get there. As I said, I'm Matt Reardon, and thank you for coming out tonight. And Commissioner Grammarosa thought it'd be important. Can you use the mic?
Can you use?
You guys can there. Thought it'd be important to get the group of people together to find out what it is, what they're talking about, what the social media says, and what it actually looks like. So what I did was, there's a project we worked on collectively, some of us in this room, that's actually a data center that's built. It's in Hammond, Indiana. And it was the first one in the state of Indiana that was constructed. And it was what's called a proof of concept. This was before any of the data center laws were passed or any of that stuff. And it was a collaborative effort between Lake County, which offered up $850,000 in loan money as a participant in this, along with the city of Hammond, to come together to do this project. And, I've done warehouses and all kinds of stuff in my career, and this data center things come up, and I'm like, what is this thing? What is it? That's a big building with computers in it. And I'm like, oh, all right, I think I know what that means. But when we started with this project, and as relates to other locations, you get to the cost of the project and the hundreds of millions of dollars in investment that happen and how that comes together. So it's not like a distribution center, which are great, and they have nice jobs and all that's fine. They also have trucks and truck traffic and all those things with them. What I found with the data centers is this exponential amount of investment to build these facilities in a fashion that is sustainable and secure. So what did that mean? One, they don't want anybody by it. They don't want anybody to see it, don't want anybody near it. There's security to get into it. There's security to get out of it. You have to badge in and badge out. So, hold on, let me show you what it looks like. You guys are probably, oh, this guy's crazy. Which one?
The down arrow.
That's what it looks like. This is a marina. This is Lake Michigan. This is a park. On the side of, the west side of this is the Hammond Marina. Here is the Marquette Trail that goes around here. And then there's another spur. Then Robertsdale's back here. And this is the a site that was Commonwealth Edison. So it's the dirtiest coal-fired power plant in the Great Lakes. So it sat there through the initiative of Tom Dockett and a bunch of other people came together to do this project. So it was not, it sounded almost too good to be true, okay? You're like, how much does this cost? $125 million. It's a 100,000 square foot building. No building costs that much. This one did. So in the process, I'll just kind of describe it. Here are the generators. This is the office. This is the cooling. And in the back, there's cooling back there. So we brought a group from LaPorte to come look at this, listen to it, hear it, and talk to the facility manager, Paul Rambo. And they had all the questions. What about water? Well, this facility, if they wanted to, could use 4 million gallons of water a day if they wanted to. They don't. They use water to run the toilets and the sinks. Any cooling related to water is non-contact cooling water, meaning it goes in and out and back into where it came from. Okay? So they're not burning through water like some of the operations do. And what I've seen in this area is that the people that are investing in data are cognizant of what people are saying about it. Hey, stop wasting our resources. That's not comfortable for us. So they're gleaning and moving towards that. Well, how can we do this better? Now, does this use a lot of electricity? Sure it does. It's going to. There's really not much you can say other than this is going to use a lot of electricity. This particular facility uses 18 megawatts. That's not a lot in data center reality. Adjacent to this parcel, on a 22-acre site, will be another facility built that's 450,000 feet, that the total investment will be $3 billion. It'll be 180 megawatts. During construction, there'll be about 1,000-ish tradesmen out there with a signed project labor agreement. And the wages are estimated to be, for the labor, $600 million. 3 years. So the money goes somewhere. So the goal, in this particular instance of the city of Hammond, and the state of Indiana, and Lake County, we need to make sure that those jobs are people from here, not from Tennessee, or Kentucky, or Ohio, or Alabama, but from Indiana. So what they did was this. It's a great idea. Let's work out a deal. Data center guy says, sure, what's the deal? Hammond first, Lake County second, Indiana third. If you want another contractor, you need to come see us about who that is and why. So what, you can imagine what happened. The majority of that building got built with people from Indiana, materials purchased from Indiana, and that project was about a year and a half. The second project, it's about 140,000 feet. Be about a 3-year build, 3 years, if they broke ground. Now, you're like, all right, Matt, you put it on an old coal plant. Well, sure, you would do that. What's the matter going in there? Anyway, what really drove how this worked is where and how the availability of power is. So I was going to talk a little bit more about site selection and what people do. And in this instance, whether it's a data center or a transportation, let's just use the transportation as another example. If I'm going to build a warehouse, it's got to be by a highway, and I might want to be by train tracks, so I'm going to find property by those things. For a data center, they need to be by or where power will be. Because to do all this, the people who own the data center have to pay the public utility to do all these things. They have to pay. And that's how it works. They also are required, or will be required, to do what's called a power purchase agreement. Wouldn't that look nice when it's done? Right. That represents $11 billion of assessed value. The assessed value of this county is about $3 billion. This is what 11 billion looks like on 72 acres, okay? So for the first building, the city of Hammond gave some tax incentives. There will be some tax incentives on the second building. But the point is this, that they've identified this location working with the utility company. The utility company has agreed to provide the power. The data center people pay for the power. So, I mean, I'm mad about my NIPSCO bill anyway, but imagine what their cost is per month to run one of these. $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, right? So part of this process is to make sure of two things, and I've heard this in the public quite a few times. One, let's make sure that there's no impact to the residents of the area. This came up in the City of Hammond discussion. I heard it. So the utilities are under the auspices of the IURC. I know this commission has been, let's say, very vigilant about the activities at the IURC and how they have to operate and what they do. So that's also a key part of this. That's the office space, people working there. This is some general information about power usage for data centers. I mean, I'm not a power expert by any means, but there are those. They come together as part of the data center teams. And there's no legal way for a data set for a utility to divert power away from people and service any one customer. I mean, let's just use the existing steel mills as the example. What if they decided to do that? Too bad. We're going to divert all the energy to the steel making process. They can't do it. So that's not what happens. Here's some water usage that, because this is something that has been discussed, and I've read it and seen all the pluses and minuses. And, you know, through your zoning code, you can dictate the kind of process you have to have. No, you can't suck the aquifer dry. Nobody's going to agree to that. Yes, you can do this kind of process. We would agree to this. So that's part of all of the planning process that Mitch is going to talk to you about. Because none of this gets done overnight. Nobody fights to spend $3 billion. There's a lot of due diligence that goes into this. That's it on the site selection portion of this discussion. There's been nobody that's knocked on our door, nobody who's filed anything and said, we would like to go to this location in this county at this point. Again, this is a preemptive discussion about what they are, what they can be, and some of the community and traditional impacts. So I'll turn it over to Mitch to talk about zoning for a minute.
Right. Thanks, Matt. So if a data center was to come to LaPorte County, how would it be regulated? Where would it go? How do we cite it? That's all done through our joint zoning ordinance currently. Now, our joint zoning ordinance, we have a schedule of use table, and what that does is highlight all our zoning districts with approximately 300 uses that are listed. That's not an inclusive list of uses, of course. That changes over time. And if you were to look up data center and did a search on the digital copy of 400 pages of our joint zoning, you wouldn't find data center anywhere in it. So what happens in that case is it goes to similar or like use, and that's discretion of the department head. In this case, it would be our zoning administrator, building commissioner, Mr. Mike Poland. Of course, he might ask some feedback from myself and others. But if you look at our zoning ordinance and a schedule of use table, what you'd see is the most similar like use would be warehousing, in my mind anyway. And then you would see in those zoning districts that it's permitted in only 2 districts. That's light industry and heavy industry. Those are the only 2 districts. So anything in that case, anything that would be warehousing and all the site development provisions within our 400-page zoning ordinance would apply to data centers. And those are such things as, buffers, a photometric plan for lighting, screening, you got parking, a whole slew of different regulations in that zoning ordinance that would apply to a data center today. Now, taking that further, if we were going to make changes to the zoning ordinance, of course, that would go through our planning commission, and there'd be a public hearing involved. It might be many public hearings involved, don't know. That might take 6 months, maybe more, maybe less. But then we could have a section of our zoning ordinance called use regulations. So if it was permitted, say, in a light industrial, which I think we probably all agree on right now, that's probably a good place, a light industrial or heavy industrial, we could have changes to that as far as our plan commission, and we could have different things related to specifically data centers and our use regulations. And then I bring up things like, I think the state of Virginia has the most data centers. So there's a lot of ordinances out there. And one thing we might look at as noise as a big complaint of data centers. So maybe do a noise study as a requirement. These are things not done in this venue, but again, in our plan commission and public hearings. So I just want to run that by everybody, that even though if we have no petitions like Matt mentioned, but if we did, we would be protected somewhat because it would fall under our zoning ordinance. There's 400 pages of all kind of regulations that they'd have to run through. I'd like to add one more thing, is we are in a process of doing our 20-year long-range comprehensive plan, and we just started that endeavor. It's going to be a 12 to 15-month process, and that's a policy plan where basically dictates how and where, and we would like to grow over the next 20 years. And those recommendations that come out of that would be a future land use plan and land use maps, future land use maps. So an opportunity would be to meld that effort and this, because this is definitely a new land use. It makes sense to incorporate in our comp plan, take the recommendations of our comp plan and devise changes to our regulatory zoning ordinance. And that's all I have.
Okay, is there anyone else from our committee that would like to speak? We have council. We're all good.
I'd just like to thank all the committee members up here and just make sure that everybody's aware that we're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. Get all of our info that we have on data centers out to everybody here. Take your guys' input as well. We want to hear your concerns. We're here to listen. I think we have a lot of planning ahead of us.
Would you like to speak a little bit?
So, Paul Vicari, Stormwater Management Director for LaPorte County. I'd like to mention that we just, in the last 2 years, updated our stormwater management ordinance. And when I look at the picture of the opportunity there's certainly an economic opportunity, taxes, jobs that may not be obvious. I think there's ancillary jobs too that relate to the industry that provides. But just like any project, so that we don't undermine the economic opportunities, we really need to look at how do we protect our resources in the process. And I think what you'll find is with these large corporations that do these data centers, at least in my research, most of them have sustainability programs. Most of them are going to be interested in things that will provide offsets for the environment. What makes our area, you see this big blue here, there's a big reason why that data center is there is because of the water consumption. So they would really be undermining themselves if they're not addressing that and sustaining that in the future. So starting with using our stormwater ordinance as a tool, I think you work with that, you work with our, as Mitch mentioned, the joint zoning ordinance. Maybe there are some amendments we need to make to it. But in terms of the stormwater review, we already have in place addressing large impervious areas. They're going to need to address their post-construction. There's a lot of hardscape there. There's going to be a lot of increased runoff, and our permits require them to address that. As far as the loop water, of course, you're going to be looking for sustainable ways to minimize the amount of water that you're using to cool your systems. So that's about all the comment that I have right now. I think we have some good tools in place, and working with these companies, I think I not only see economic opportunity, I see sustainable green opportunity as well.
And you know, Matt, one thing that you didn't touch base on was, what is the income currently that generates?
The
Use the mic, please.
So before you had a coal-fired power plant, had 120 jobs. It was, Carl, what was the AV of that thing? Like 80 million, something like that.
Sounds right.
You know, something in that neighborhood. It was like $80 million of assessed value times 3%, which is the tax rate in Hammond. They're not at 1.9, they're at 3%. So everything in that community is. So that thing gets shut down, knocked down. It wipes out $80 million of assessed value from the community. And as a parcel sitting there, sheet draining into Lake Michigan, like parcels that don't have anything on them anywhere. Nobody's regulating it. It's just draining wherever it goes. Once the project started again, right? So we spent 120 million, plus or minus. That's excluding the machinery inside. When I say that, that's the compute equipment. That's roughly the same amount inside that building that the entirety of the operation of the coal plant was at that location. So that's another 80 plus million, plus the facility, which is assessed at about $150 per square foot is the assessment for that building. And it was an interesting process because there wasn't any of these in Indiana, and the assessor didn't know how to do this. And because there isn't a measure, and there's some state representatives in here, there isn't a measure to measure this. I'm just kidding. There isn't a measure to quantify, like, what are you getting out of the building with our assessment method, because it was so new and different. So part of the focus was make sure you're taking care of the existing conditions, which is stormwater pollution prevention planning. What's this footprint look like, and what's the runoff? Are there any environmental permits necessary? The answer is no. Do they have generators on site? They do. Do they test them? Yes, they do. So in that industry, I guess, let me put it this way, they're so front-facing they don't want any problems. And because of that reason, they've been pretty forthcoming when communities have questions about them. And there's different size actors in this space. There's the big people. This building here was a co-location facility, and what that means is it's a facility for rent. And two tenants went in there and rented it. And they don't rent, they rent megawatts. They don't rent space. And however many computers they want to put in, they put them in. That's how it works. So,
but isn't there a number that they're giving back to the?
So the next facility project, the city of Hammond will get $4 million a year for 40 years in revenue and payment in lieu of tax or community funding that they can spend anywhere across the board. This project's also the facility, which an estimate. I'm hesitant to give you one, but let's just use $1 billion for the building, would be abated over a 10-year period, declining, and that's multiplied by 3%, which is the tax rate. So now, not to bore everybody to death, but we have tax caps and limitations and levies. So it doesn't really matter how much more assessment you keep getting. It'll just keep putting downward pressure on the tax rate. What matters is when you get a check and a chunk that can be used and can be programmed for specific projects that are community oriented, that are job creation oriented, that can help with the continuation of more job creation and sustainability. So instead of digging a hole in the backyard, you have programming and projects. And I know that from our discussions with the commissioners and Commissioner Grammarosa, that's one of the targets that if one of these deals comes here, that's what the county would be working on. What would we do with this? Where would be a good way to allocate it? What community groups can we function with? How can we do these things? So those are the kind of the big picture ideas. But, you know, the first one was kind of a really traditional economic development deal. There was some funding from the state. There was a tax increment financing bond that was done, and that was it. So when this really came to light was when the companies who rented the space got a tax bill, and they said, I have $500 million worth of machines in that building. Why is my tax bill this much? I said, well, Indiana has personal property tax. So that's where this removal of that in a competing fashion with other states comes into play. So they came to an agreement. Now, they've learned since then. So that's where this other funding can come into play to the community. So it's a long process. I mean, the stormwater pollution prevention thing, I mean, it kind of breezed through it. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, you have to file, it's a local and a state thing, building permits, never mind the zoning approvals. So, I mean, it's hard. It sounds weird. It's hard to spend $3 billion, but it is, because if you're going to try and do it the right way, you got to follow the entire process. So I know this committee's, you know, at least our Office of Economic Development and the commissioners, look, we're looking for a good project that'll help increase assessed valuation, that'll crush it on industrial, commercial, or construction jobs, and then see what kind of sustainability comes out the back end. Is it a 50-person data center, or like that first building is about 30? The second building will be 130. So the idea is to focus this campus, only spend once where these utilities are, where the power is. And one last thing, there's no ability to pick another power provider. You get to pick the one in the territory you're in. So Indiana has different territories. LaPorte County is part NIPSCO and part Indiana Michigan Power. St. Joe County, part NIPSCO, part Indiana Michigan Power.
So just kind of to recap here, I think, you know, we hit the 4 subjects that we wanted to. That was location, location, location. The water issues that's been at the forefront, really concerned about how much water we would be taking out of our watershed. And then electricity, how do we work with the electrical company, making sure that the residents aren't paying a higher rate, that we're really kind of, you know, the company that's coming in, they would take the bulk of it, and the tax incentives. And I think that we went ahead and we hit those 4 subjects. And you know, moving forward, we just have to kind of like balance. We have to go with a balanced approach. We have to figure out how we're going to move forward. I think that this first discussion was really good. We got a lot of information out there. If I would encourage everyone that's in this room, if you have any questions, call the commissioner's office, call economic development. You know, we have a lot of people that have a lot of different information. As you're giving us your ideas, we can take that information, we can discuss it here. We are always going to have these open meetings. We're not going to have any kind of private meetings. We're hoping that we'll keep on having these workshops as we move forward. As we get your questions, then this way we can bring it to this group and we can figure out how we can get that information out or figure out what it is that we need to do. I think that this was a really good open discussion. And with that, maybe we'd like to close this workshop. So thank you all for coming.